Restart.
Thank you for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, James Reiner.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to a city that we can't tell you the name of. Cough cough. Published June 1st, 1996. The Invasion was quickly followed by The Visitor, also published June 1st, 1996, and The Encounter, published August 1st, 1996. The aliens are among us, but you'd never know it because they take human bodies as hosts. When 5 teenagers find themselves getting in the middle of the fight, they are gifted with the power to morph into any animal they can get the DNA of. But if teenagers are Earth's last hope, just how screwed are we?
Did you write that yourself, or did you pull that from the book?
I wrote that myself.
Oh, that's really well done.
That's right, I'm professional. So, background, this is your obsession. One of many, but this is still your obsession.
Yeah, I would say it is little James Reiner's first obsession. I mean, I was obsessed with other things, but I would have to say this children's series, which I argue strongly, it's not really a children's series. It tricks you. Shaped a lot of what I am today, as melodramatic as that sounds.
That's what children's book series do.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, this, when I look back at it, my sense of story, my sense of liking sci-fi, my sense of drama, a lot of it stems from this book series. It shaped a lot of what I'm interested in to consume.
Your mom loves to tell the story how you would talk about the series relentlessly.
Yes.
And her favorite thing to do was when there were other people in the car, in the house, anything with you where you're kind of trapped, she'd be like, oh, why don't you tell them about that book series you love so much? And you would just go.
Yes, I would tell them everything. I could say everything about it. I wasn't really into reading before these, but when my parents would get me one of these, I would stay up all night. I remember my flashlight, too. It was one of those tiger flashlights that when you hit the button, it opens its mouth and roars and has light.
Ooh.
Yes. And I remember using that thing, and I had to be very careful because it made a noise. So I had to open it, covering the speaker so it wouldn't make enough noise to wake anyone. And I would sit there and try to read my book with that tiger light.
That's really cute.
Yes. I would reread them, and I would obsess over them, and I absolutely loved them.
You own all of them.
I do now.
It's less impressive when I say I own all the series of Unfortunate Events books. There's only 13 of those.
Yeah, there's 54 of these.
Maybe once I get the whole Nancy Drew, then we'll be even.
Well, there's 54 of the main series. Then you have spin-off like the Andalite Chronicles, the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, the Ellimist Chronicles. I would have to say the Ellimist book is my favorite out of all of them.
Oh, wow.
You know, I'm a little biased because I grew up with it, but when I read it, it hit me hard. I mean, it is deep. And a lot of sci-fi tropes I've noticed in other books now that I'm an adult and I've read a lot more sci-fi existed in other ones. But as a kid, this was my first introduction to intergalactic beings that live forever and they've seen some stuff and competing in this duel. I mean, when I think about it, I mean, E.E. Smith, one of the first sci-fi writers of the 20th century who inspired things like Star Wars, other sci-fi writers like Frank Herbert's Dune and stuff like that. He was the inventor of the first space opera, but his book is about epic evil being faced down by epic good, right? That's kind of the plot of that book. But as a kid, it was my first introduction, and I absolutely loved that book.
So the funny thing is, because there are so many freaking books, this book series was around when I was in elementary school as well. And my background with this series is I would go to scholastic fairs or the library or whatever, and I would see these books, and I would look at the cover and go, that's weird, and then put it back. The cover really turned me off.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Under the gimmicks, because this was a scholastic book, it was during the time of Goosebumps, which a big part of that was kids judge books by their covers. So they tried to make the covers really entertaining or interesting.
I also didn't like Goosebumps because of the cover.
Yes. So if you look at a Goosebump book's cover, it really wants to grab your attention. And it makes sense because they're marketing to kids. And Animorphs was the same way. They'd have a picture of a child slowly morphing into an animal. You'd flip it open because it always had a cutout of the animal around the animal. And then it showed the animal and whatever whatever scene that's happening, which I always liked as a kid. It was always fun getting a new book because I would go on the internet back in the day when it was the everyone get off the phone, we have to get on the internet, and the boot up sound.
It's wonderful.
I would go searching because they would post the covers of the books in advance, and I'd look at the cover of the book and I would be like, oh man, what's the scene behind this cover, right? And then I remember getting the book and being all excited and turning like, oh, what's going to happen in this book, right? And then another little gimmick is down in the bottom corner of the page, it'll show the child morphing into the animal as you flip the pages really quickly. I don't know what that's called when you take your thumb and strike them across the pages, but that's what you do.
Animation.
But this is all childish gimmicks. I very fervently argue that this book is deceptive. It is not entirely for children. It is not for little kids.
Oh, which perfect slide into this. Age level for this, I would call it mid-lit.
Yes, so it starts mid-lit. With the ending of the whole series, K.A. Applegate doesn't hold your hand. She ends with a pretty adult ending. I mean, I've seen people on the internet say this book series, it is secretly about children soldiers and the drama of war and trauma. And I mean, I remember one parent say she was reading it to her kids and it started to get a little too dark and she decided to stop reading it to her child.
It sounds like it grows with you.
Yes, it is mature. It gets more and more mature as you go. I mean, it's dealing with stuff like genocide. It's dealing with stuff like death, the sense of loss, really mature stuff as you go along. I just couldn't go into, slavery. I mean, the premise of the book is about slavery, basically. So it's very mature. Anyways, I'm sure you have a more extensive list of trigger warnings you would like to share.
Yes, we have some content warnings here. More than your, I don't know, mid-lits can be edgy sometimes, but we have blood, slavery, graphic violence, gore, murder, nudity implied, death of a parent mentioned, parasites, sexual harassment, animal cruelty, and death. And that covers all 3 books. I did not separate them. Some of that stuff might happen in one book and not in the others, but there are other ones that happen in all 3.
And that's the tip of the iceberg.
Judge a book by its cover. The first one is that's weird because they have the human face and then they use really bad computer graphics for the human face morphing, and so really bad computer graphics. The second one is a little less weird. They figured out how to shift the face better. And then the third one, I thought it would be a Marcos book because the narrator for that one, Tobias, does not look like that.
Yeah, the children, they have to use different actors throughout the series. So sometimes they look kind of the same. Sometimes they use different children.
Yeah, but I thought it was going to be a Marcus book because he had dark hair.
No, he was the 5th book in the series. So his narration comes in the 5th book, then the 10th book, then the 15th. But it keeps pretty consistent. The first book is Jake, 6th book is Jake. First book I actually read was number 6. Ooh, I forget what it's called off the top of my head.
I would be shocked if you had the names memorized, honestly. They're so broad.
They are. I mean, they fit. The first one's The Invasion.
No, it works as a series, but it's not like oh yeah, I know that The Visitors is this book.
Yeah, it's not like Nancy. It's like, oh, Nancy Rue and the mystery of the hidden clock door or something. It's always a one word, right? The first book is The Invasion. Second book is The Visitor. The third book is The Encounter. So they all make sense. The first book is the children find out the aliens have invaded. So, of course, it's called The Invasion. Second book is about infiltrating their high school principal's home. So the visitor is actually Rachel in the form of a cat, but also it's, the aliens. It's kind of a double meaning on that one. And then the encounter makes sense because they discover a spaceship that's coming down to Earth to suck up water for the mothership up in space. So it's an encounter. They accidentally run into this thing and, hey, this is an opportunity to try to strike out at the Yerks.
Yeah, but you could have labeled any of these books The Encounter.
True. And that's the thing. They're kind of vague, and I like that because then you have to read the book to really know what the title's about. As a kid, I didn't call them by their names. I said, oh, the one where Jake morphs into a lizard, the one that Rachel morphs into a cat, oh, the one that Tobias morphs into a hawk, oh, the one that Cassie morphs into a dolphin, oh, the one that Marcos morphs into a gorilla. I have them in my head as the animals they morph into, so that's how I referred to the books, was the one where insert character's name morphs into insert the animal they morph into. So I never referred to them by their names, basically.
Honestly, that makes a lot of sense. But side note, I wanted to write a parody Nancy Drew called Nancy Drew and the Secret Clock Door.
Isn't that like one of the books is she finds a door and a clock or something? something?
No, it's called Secret of the Old Clock.
Oh, okay. Doesn't the old clock have a door, though?
No.
Oh, I always thought that was the twist. Like, oh, the clock has a door in it. We're going to go through it.
No, I think you're confusing the first and second book. The first one has a clock, and the second one has a secret passage.
Oh, I guess I'm mixing them up. Well, there you go. Now you can write a book about it.
I love it. So, just starting with book 1. I like how it starts off, and it's literally like, my name's Jake, but I can't give you my last name because then people would find me. And then I live in a town, but I can't tell you what town it is because, then they'd find us. But it's a normal town. It could even be your town. Immediately, the marketer in me was like, this book wastes no time in getting kids to identify with the characters.
Oh, yeah. He could be in your hometown and you could be them and it could be happening right around you. I remember me and my friends at school would joke and pretend that the Yerks were invading or that someone had been taken over by the Yerks, right? It really engaged our imaginations where we actually were a part of the war, basically.
So good marketing.
Good marketing, yes.
But yeah, we have 5 characters, Marco, Jake, Tobias, Rachel, and Cassie, walking home one day, go through this construction site they're not supposed to go through, and see aliens.
Yes, they all meet at the mall by coincidence.
Because it's 1996.
Yes, so malls are still relevant around this time. But yeah, Jake and Marcos are both friends for quite a while. They run into Rachel and Cassie.
Rachel is Jake's cousin.
Yes, and Cassie and Jake kind of have a crush on each other. It's subtly hinted at the beginning, but it becomes more of a thing later in the series. I don't know if you picked up on that.
It's so obvious.
Okay, I was about to say, is this me just knowing context, or is this actually very blatantly obvious?
No, he keeps saying things, and anyway, it's pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious. So yeah, anyways, and they run into Tobias as well. Tobias is from a troubled home.
Tobias' family situation is something happened to his parents.
Yes.
And his uncle and aunt are sharing custody, as in, I can't deal with this kid anymore. You take him, and doesn't actually care about him.
Yes, you learn a lot more about Tobias later. So yeah, they all kind of say, hey, let's walk home together. And they end up saying, hey, let's cut through this construction site.
Oh, and I was going to add, so Tobias has kind of hooked on to Jake because Jake is nice to him because he's bullied relentlessly at school, which is not great. But it's the 1990s, so it's handled in a 1990s way where it's like, that's just life, man. Bullies. Can't do anything about them. But continue.
But yeah, they walk through the site and they see an alien spacecraft land, and out pops out of the spacecraft a alien. And I love the Andalite design. That's the species of alien that pops out.
The nice species of aliens.
Yes, they're quote unquote good guys. At least that's what you think at the beginning of the series. You'll learn a lot more about them as the series goes on. They're a bit more complex than that, than just the good guys. They make bad decisions. They do some shady stuff as well. But overall, they're still the good guys.
As of book 3, they are the good guys.
They are the good. Well, you'll learn more about them. And I'm not saying they're horrible. Let's just say, like human beings, they have their contradictions. But anyways, out pops this wounded Andalite warrior named Elfangor. And what an Andalite looks like is, imagine a centaur with blue fur, basically. You have the 4 legs. They say deer because they're more...
spindly.
Yeah, they're not as thick as horse legs. They're more slender in their horse-like legs. And they have the torso. They have 6 fingers. They don't have 5 like we do on each hand. They don't have a mouth. They have nothing where a mouth would be. They have pointed ears, sort of like elves. They have vertical slit noses that are against their face. And what's really distinct are their eye stalks. They have eyes like humans do in front of their faces. But they also have on top of their heads these 2 imagined alien eye stalks where there's these stalks that come out with eyes on top of them. And what's nice about those, these creatures used to be herding animals. They use these eyes. They can look in multiple directions. So it's really hard to sneak up on an Andalite. And if you do try to sneak up, the other super defining feature is they have a long tail like a scorpion, and at the end they have a curved blade. And this blade is always described as super quick. It can cut things very quickly. There's many instances where an Andalite will threaten someone by suddenly their tail snapping forward and the blade is pressed against someone's neck. So they can be very deadly as well. But they are gentle creatures. Since they don't have a mouth, they actually have these things on the end of their hooves that when they run on grass or any other vegetation, it absorbs the nutritions from it. It breaks it up and absorbs whatever they're basically running on. So they're an alien species that's very close to nature, heavily implying good side, that they're good people. Funny enough, Applegate was inspired by Tolkien.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like the elves. They're inspired a bit by the elf folk. in Tolkien's novels, just like the Yerks are inspired by the orcs. Funny enough, she thought of the term Yerk is very similar to the actual term Tolkien used. I forget what it is in the Elvish language or the Dark Tongue. I can't remember which Tolkienian language, but the word Yerk was inspired by the Tolkien word for orc. So they are definitely a reference to the great evil plaguing humanity. But yeah, the wounded Andalite comes out and gestures the children forward.
And he is dying.
He is dying. He is severely wounded. There's been a big battle up in our atmosphere where the Andalites have engaged the Yerks, and the Andalites were surprised and lost the battle. So the Yerks are about to show up and kill him, but he gestures the children over. He speaks to them with telekinesis. I like how Applegate designates when someone's speaking in your mind by using the little alligator mouths, the greater than and less than symbols to put around like quotation marks. So you always know when someone's speaking in a mind. And you can speak to a whole group of people, or you can just speak one-on-one with someone. It's your classic telekinesis. Anyways, Elfangor speaks telekinesis to them to gesture them forward. He explains the whole situation. The planet is being invaded by these creatures called the Yerks. He's about to die. They're about to come to kill him. The Andalites who fight the Yerks won't be there at Earth for quite some time. By then, the Yerks might take over the entire planet. So since he's desperate, he's like, I'm going to have to give you kids this power to fight the Yerks. And he produces basically this blue cube and says it gives them the power to morph into any animal.
They have no time to process this either. He's like, hey, the aliens exist, and also I'm dying, but the world is being taken over by horrible things called Yerks. Anyway, your last hope, here's a cube. Good luck.
And Tobias gets kind of the lowdown, and he learns about the Yerks, which I guess this would be a good time to explain the Yerks. The Yerks are slug-like creatures. They existed on this planet where they have a kind of leaden color, a gray sun, and they basically just swim in these pools, these Yerk pools.
Of specific alien stuff. I'll find what exactly it's called, but alien stuff.
Yeah, but these pools, they swim, and Yerks, being a slug, they can't see really, they can't hear anything. They're just these poor slugs that have not much of an existence, even though they're rather intelligent. But it happened one day that they figured out that they could enter into a other creature's head via an ear canal and are able to flatten themselves and wrap themselves around a brain. And when they do so, they can control the creature.
Yeah. Remember that parasite warning? It's gross.
Yes. So this is the parasite. So yeah, Yerks found this out. And when they found this out, they're like, awesome. We don't have to be these mindless creatures in these pools. We can experience life now. But they took a very evil approach to it, saying, well, now we just need to enslave a bunch of creatures and force them to be our host.
We can take over the world.
Yeah, basically. So they've branched out since then. They've taken over different creatures. Two of the main creature species they take over is one is called the Hork-Bajir. They're these dinosaur kind of walking bipedal dinosaur creatures with blades all over their bodies. Very dangerous looking. The Yerks like to use them as basically their soldiers. They're very deadly. They can use all the blades on their body to attack creatures, cut them, do terrible things.
Yeah, I always imagined them as like a Kabutops from Pokemon.
Yeah, sort of. I like the depictions. The first time you see a Hork-Bajir is on the cover of the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, where they actually tell the background of these creatures, which sadly enough
they're very nice.
Yes, they are peaceful creatures. They lived on a planet where there's these giant trees, and that's why they have blades on them, is they would use the blades to climb trees and cut them, because guess what? They're vegetarians. They eat the bark of trees, and they're actually have the mentality of children. So they're very innocent, and that's why it's really sad that their whole planet was destroyed and taken over by the Yerks, and now they're forced to do horrible, horrible things. So again, this isn't really a kid's novel. You have this entire species of innocent tree-dwelling creatures that are forced to be evil soldiers for this alien race. And then the other species are called taxons. They're giant worm creatures that have an insatiable hunger. Those were one of the first creatures that the Yerks took over.
Because they were like, that sounds cool.
Yes. Well, it was convenient, easy to take over, because the taxons are dumb creatures. They just are obsessed over eating things.
They're very gluttonous and greedy.
So there's a hierarchy in the Yerk culture. If you're a nobody, you would get something simple like a taxon, which is hard to control, and it's very stupid, and it's not the greatest thing to control. Then if you move up, you would get a Hork-Bajir. You'd actually have better eyesight, you'd have more mobility, and then now human beings are such a coveted species to take over, because they see in such beautiful colors, they can experience such wonderful tastes in their mouth, they really can experience life. So humans are becoming the new target for the Yerks, because yes, this species would be very useful to us. So that's why they have their eyes set on Earth, and they're secretly trying to take us over by slowly incorporating destroying as many important people as they can until they can just take the whole planet over.
Man, they would love to be a mantis shrimp. They don't know that they want to be that, but they would love being mantis shrimps.
And that brings up the other fun thing, because minus the sci-fi, this book is a druids, anyone who likes druids, fantasy, because these kids get to experience all these different animals they get to morph into.
Yeah, you get to learn a lot about animals.
You do. You learn a lot of little facts. Applegate is really good at showing what it would be like to be this animal, because every time they morph into one, they have what they call the animal brain beside their brain that's telling them by instinct what to do, what to think. So you get to experience the POV of an animal. But battle-wise, the morphing ability is really good because they can turn into some strong animals from planet Earth to fight the Yerks. So Hork-Bajir is dangerous, but you can battle against it if you turn into, say, a gorilla or an elephant or a tiger and face it down that way.
Yeah, so the book mainly consists of them being like, well, okay, we need to transform into things, so we need to collect animal DNA. And so they do that for a bit. And then they learn from Jake's brother, which is very sad. Jake's brother is a host. That's what they're called when they're taken over.
Yes.
And it's very obvious. And then Jake's just kind of in denial about it and angry about it. My man, come on, it's true. Which got me a little bit with Marcus. So Marcus is reluctant. His mother passed away, and that caused his dad to just slip into a massive depression. And he's worried that if something happens to him, I'm the only thing left he has, basically. And so he's very reluctant. He doesn't want to be a part of this.
Yes. So Marcus, I guess this is a good chance to talk about each one. Marcus is reluctant because of his dad. So he's always the skeptic. He's always, I think we're going too fast. We need to play this safe. I don't think we need to do that. He's always the voice of, let's be careful, right? Or let's not do this.
And the first 3 books, he is the voice of, we shouldn't do this. Just ignore it. Just pretend this isn't happening. And that gets me because he's like, oh, I need to protect my dad, protect my head. Your best friend's brother is a host.
Yeah, each character has its strong points and their weaknesses. Marcos's strong point is he's the skeptic. He helps kind of put the brakes down if they get a little too ambitious or crazy. But his his flaw, I guess you could say, is that he's delusional. He's thinking, hey, if we ignore this, or if we don't do something ambitious to try to stop them, we can just ignore this, which isn't true. I mean, Jake is an example. His brother is a host. All of their family members are going to get sucked up into this if they don't do something, right? So Marcus takes it too extreme where he doesn't realize the stakes at hand.
Yeah, and so I accepted it where most of the time, but there was specifically a scene when they were about to go do a thing, and he was like, well, what's the point? We don't need to do it. It's whatever. And Jake's brother is a host.
So Jake is the reluctant leader.
He doesn't know why he's a leader. It's kind of funny. I kind of love it. He's just like, I'm the leader. Now everyone's looking at me, so I guess I have to make the decision.
Which is his personality, because he has solutions. He naturally leads people.
He's a folk hero.
Yeah, it's a George Washington situation where, oh, I don't want to be a leader, but I'm really good at it, so naturally everyone wants me to be the leader.
Yeah, and he's not reluctant leader. Like I said, he's just confused.
Yes, and his brother's a host, which really spurs Jake to want to do something about this. He realizes the stakes at that point. Then you have Jake's cousin, Rachel. Rachel is very beautiful. Everyone assumes on surface level when they meet her, she's just some beautiful, dumb blonde, right? And Applegate turns that stereotype on its head. Rachel is super aggressive, super ambitious, super let's do this, let's bust down some doors. She is, as Marcos likes to put it, because it's the 90s, Xena warrior princess. She is the crack some heads and make some noise kind of person.
Yeah.
She flies off the handle. Her strength is she's really strong. She's a warrior through and through. She can be relied on to do the hard thing in battle. The negative side is she has a temper and she's a bit rash, as we learn in the second book.
And once her mind is made up, it is made up.
It is made up. She's a bit stubborn in that regard. So she's a bit of flies off the handle, loose cannon kind of character as well. But she's very strong. She is the one people turn to if something needs to get done.
And she's very loyal and very brave.
And she's very loyal. And then you have Cassie, Rachel's friend and Jake's crush. And Cassie has a crush on him too. It's will they, won't they through the series. But Cassie's parents run an animal sanctuary. They work at the zoo in the city, but they also, out of their barn, rescue injured animals from the wild and rehabilitate them and release them into the wild. But Cassie has more of a gentle nature. She's kind of the mom of the group, making sure there's peace. She's also a good warrior, too. I don't want to make her seem like she's all cookies.
No, it's cookies. It absolutely is cookies. But I will kill you if you harm my children.
So yeah, she's, I would say, the peacemaker of the group. She always wants peace in the dynamic between everyone. But she's also really in touch with animals. Just like her parents, she loves taking care of them. She kind of has this sixth sense on how they're feeling. She knows a lot of facts about them. And because of that, or in relation to that, she's the best at morphing. Whenever she morphs, she doesn't make it look disgusting, because every time people morph, the other characters say how disturbing it looks.
Very uncanny valley.
Yes, very uncanny valley. But Cassie does it in a very artistic and talented way.
She's also faster, and she can pick things up better. She's better at controlling the animal brain.
Exactly. So she is the best at morphing. She is more in tune with the power than the others are.
She's also a black girl, so good for her.
Yeah, it does come into play later. They actually do time traveling at one point, and they time travel to an alternative America where racism more prominent, and you have that dynamic. But honestly,
in general, it's a really good black character representation.
Yes, I was about to say that about, all the characters.
She's smart, she's kind, she's funny, she's worth being flirted with.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Like, their ethnicities aren't a big part of their characters, but they are at the same time. I like the subtle hand that Applegate uses in the novel.
Yeah, and I think it's very well done, because I've seen black readers be like, I'm tired of reading stories about trauma. That seems like the only story publishers want from us is about our racial trauma. Can I just read a book where a black character's cool, please?
Actually, Cassie, I think, has the only normal family dynamic. Both her parents are fine. We have Rachel's parents are divorced, so she's dealing with a divorced home with her sisters. Jake's dynamic's fine, but we now know that his brother's a host, so he's having that divide. Marcos's father is just a mess because his mother vanished. And then Tobias doesn't know either of his parents. He knew his mom, but she was unstable growing up. She struggled to take care of him, and he has his aunt and uncle. So really, Cassie has the only solid home dynamic, which is great because the kids always go to her bar to have group meetings and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. The parents are both highly educated, very passionate, good at their jobs.
They're both veterinarians, or I think her mom's a veterinarian, her dad's a biologist. I can't remember the exact vet, but they have degrees. They're specialists in animals.
They're very, very respected in the community.
Yeah, Applegate's very in tune with representation and social issues, which she puts in her book very well. Then we move on to Tobias. He's a shy kid, but he leaps. He feels a connection to Elfangor. He feels a connection to this cause.
Because, let's be honest, this is the first time he's ever been able to do anything important.
Yeah, exactly.
And doesn't have to feel like, oh, I'm a failure or a burden all the time.
Exactly. And unfortunately, because of his devotion to the cause, in the first book, he gets stuck in a morph. Because there's a rule with the morphing power. If you're in a morph more than 2 hours, you cannot return to your original form. You are stuck in that form.
Yeah, that is the second part of the first book, is they find a Yerk pool and they're like, cool, let's just go cause chaos, honestly, because they don't know what to expect. And then Tobias transforms into a bird to help them out. And then after the situation, he was in it for too long. He wasn't paying attention to the time, or he was trapped. And so he was unable to change back. And so he's stuck as a hawk for at least all 3 books. I have a feeling he's going to come human eventually. But for the second and third book, he is a bird.
Yes, I won't ruin it, but yeah, there's a lot more to Tobias than just him being stuck in a hawk body the whole time.
So going to the Yerk pool, they collected all of these animals from the zoo, which was a great scene. I really enjoyed that.
Sorry, I wanted to go back real quick. Is it okay if we go back?
Yeah.
We never got to the point when the kids hide. Elfangor, who gave them the power, tells them to flee because the Yerks are showing up, and that's when we meet
our number 1 enemy.
Yes, the main antagonist, Visser 3. So the Yerks have a hierarchy. When you really get up in the ranks, you have a title called Visser. And there's, I forget how many of them, like 29 or some random number. But Visser 3, his number 3, shows he's really high up in the ranks. One of the reasons he's really high up in the ranks is because he is the only Yerk to have a host that is an Andalite. He has an Andalite body as his host.
Which means he can transform.
Which means he can morph. So when he arrives, he knows Elfangor, and he kind of gloats that, haha, I finally defeated you. you, you pathetic Andalite, yada, yada, yada. And then Visser 3, in front of all his minions, decides to morph into this gigantic monster that picks up Elfangor and eats him in front of the children.
They just wanted to go home after them all.
Yeah, and instead, they see a random alien warrior get eaten alive by this cruel monster. But yeah, Visser 3, he is the main antagonist. He leads the Yerk forces that are trying to invade Earth. He is the main baddie that sends shivers down the kids' spines. For good reason, because Applegate, right off the bat, shows do not want to mess around. This guy is evil. He will eat you alive. He will kill you. He is not messing around. He is pure evil.
He's evil.
He is evil. So yeah, that's the stakes when they go down, because when they find out about the underground Yerk pool, they know they're going to be facing off against Visser 3, which he is there. He does transform again.
So apparently the Yerks can't just control them all the time. Every 3 days, they have to leave the host and return to these pools to regain their energy and take them back. So that's what's happening at these Yerk pools.
Yeah, so the pools absorb the radiation from their sun, and the Yerks gain nutrition from absorbing the fluids in the pool that have absorbed the rays of their sun. So they have an artificial sun underground that's shining on these pools that absorb the sunlight, and basically the Yerks starve to death. If they go longer than 3 days without returning to eat, to absorb nutrition, they will die because they've basically starved themselves of nutrition. So every 3 days, the host has to go down to the pool. The Yerk comes out of their ear. The host will fight. They put them in cages while the Yerk absorbs, and then they'll force the host's head back into the pool where the Yerk will reinfest their body.
So people know that they're being infested. They know. They're conscious.
Oh yeah, they are aware. They're like puppets. They can't say anything. They can't do anything. And it's not fun. If you watch the movie Get Out, it's kind of like that. You can watch everything like on a movie screen. You can't move anything or say anything, but you have to watch as the host interacts with your family, does horrible things. You're just a slave to whatever they're doing.
Yeah. So the other thing, though, that they find out, because they're like, oh my gosh, all these people taken against their will. It's terrible. What? Not all of them are taken against their will.
That's true. There is a small group that think, hey, I don't have to deal with my stressful life anymore. I'm totally fine with the Yerk running my body. So the kids see that. They see them like watching TV and relaxing, and they're not in cages.
Yes, because they have a PR campaign, apparently, where, well, first of all, this is where I'm a little like, what's happening? Tom's brother is obsessed with basketball, and then suddenly he just quits the team to go do this fun hangout club thing.
Yeah, called The Sharing, which there was a name of a cult. That's it right there, The Sharing.
Yeah, and the whole point of it is to convince people, hey, life is hard, but it could be fun. It could be better, and get them to want to submit.
Yeah, so on the surface, it looks like a YMCA type thing. Troubled people or people who just need a community. Hey, come join us. And the messed up side of that is they find people who are having a difficult time with life and basically offer to them, hey, life doesn't have to be that difficult if you let an alien parasite run it for you.
Yeah, so that's how they kind of find out about Yerk pools. They go to one of the meetings. But where are his parents in on this? He just quit basketball. No, nothing. Nothing is said. Are you guys just not paying attention to your children?
I guess The Sharing has a sheen of, it's also a charity organization. They do cleanups and charity work.
Yeah, but that's not going to get you a athletic scholarship.
I could see his parents being fine with that if he decided to give up basketball to focus on joining a YMCA type.
They're so unbothered by that. Warrants a conversation. If your child suddenly quits something that they've been obsessed with, that warrants a conversation.
Or they might have had it. We just don't ever see it. We just see Jake's side of it all.
Oh, well, that's beside the point. But yeah, they go in there. It doesn't end well. They don't manage to do much. They save one woman.
Yeah, they save one woman.
And I don't know what happens to her.
Oh, we never hear her again. They tell her, hey, you need to pretend like this never happened if you want to keep your life. Also, though, if she was a host, she probably needed to just disappear, period.
Yeah.
Because she couldn't go back to her life because the Yerk knows everything about her. So that woman's life probably sucked afterwards. She probably became like a hobo or had to flee the country in any way she could.
Or something.
Well, that wasn't the kids' goal. They wanted to destroy the pools because then they would kill a lot of Yerks and save people.
Yeah, but I mean, saving people people from being hosts. That's not a bad priority here.
It's true. I mean, it is tough. Every time they describe the Yerk pool, it's not people just silently waiting in their cages. It's people screaming and crying and begging, and it's nightmare fuel. The kids have nightmares about the Yerk pools all the time.
Yes.
Because again, this book isn't really for children. It's got some pretty mature stuff about it. I mean, this is children's soldier dealing with the horrors of war.
I don't know. You keep saying that, but I would argue it is for children. It's just taking heavy topics and doing it in a way that they can emotionally and mentally comprehend.
Yes, I'm being unfair to children. Yes, it's taking mature content and, like you said, putting it in a way where they can understand. But still, it is mature content. It isn't unicorns and rainbows and
sunshine and lollipops.
Yeah, it is some serious topics of conversation, which again, I love. As a kid, I think this book really matured me mentally.
That's kind of part of what reading is for.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's the first book, is them introduced to the whole concept of it all, them trying to destroy the Yerk pool, which they didn't. Now they got to figure out a different way into the Yerk pool.
But the only thing that they managed to do is Visor 3 thinks they're Andalites.
Oh yeah, that's a big plot point. Visor 3, Visor, I never know how to pronounce it.
It looks like Visor to me.
I always pronounced it Visor, and I think you're right, though, because they made a TV show of this, by the way. I think it had like 2 seasons. It might be Visor. I always just, as a kid, said Visor.
I don't know. They're both equally cool in my mind.
Yeah, but I could be wrong. All my pronunciations are little James Reiner's pronunciations, so if they're off, that's why. As a kid, I couldn't look it up on the internet or do anything like that. I had to go off what I thought it sounded like. Anyways, he thinks they're Andalites. He thinks some of the Andalite warriors who were fighting him up in space escaped, because he thinks there's no way that the Andalites would have given random humans the power to morph. So it has to be Andalites who are doing this, because they're the only ones that can morph.
He's doing Occam's razor, and this is one of the few times that it worked against him. Whatever the simplest solution is probably the solution. And so to him, he's like, what's more likely, that these are Andalites or that these are other creatures that manage to get Andalite powers?
Yes, which the Andalites, and you'll learn more about this later in the series, are very protective of their ability to morph. They don't give it out to any other alien creatures. They keep it to themselves. So Visser 3 is not being stupid. He's literally thinking there's no way an Andalite. But Elfangor is different. He was totally on board with, I'm going to give these kids the power to morph. He actually broke laws in doing that. That's why Visser 3 is so convinced that these can't be humans. They have to be Andalites.
So they've managed to keep this perception, which is very important. But when they're morphed into animals, it's more dangerous for them, because everyone, all the hosts and whatever, are looking for animals acting strangely.
Yes, so they always have to be aware. Like when they morph into birds to fly somewhere, they have to keep really far apart, because they're worried if some Yerk looked up in the sky and saw an eagle flying with a red-tailed hawk. That doesn't happen.
That would be weird.
Yeah, that's weird. And they would point that out and possibly discover their secret. So they have to be very careful, which comes into play in the second book, because they learned in the first book that their vice principal, it's Vice Principal Chapman.
Their vice principal is a host. And to add to that a little bit, so is most of the police force.
Yes, so they can't go to the police. They're scared to go to the authorities because the Yerks could have infiltrated them and they could be found out and killed, basically. So they have to be very careful who they reveal this to. But yeah, since they know that the vice principal is a host, the second book is a big part about getting Rachel to morph into her. By the way, one of her good friends is the daughter of the vice principal, and her friend is struggling at home because her parents are both hosts and they're acting weird.
So she's acting very weird with Rachel. She's pulling away from her and Rachel doesn't really know what's going on. And she's worried at one point that she's a host herself, but through being a cat and pretending to be her cat specifically, she learns that no, it's just that all of a sudden it seems like her parents don't love her anymore. And that's something children do all the time, is they take grown-up issues and blame themselves. You know, it's like, my parents are getting divorced because they don't love me anymore. I was such a terrible child and their marriage is being broken up.
Yes, but also her parents are hosts, so they're not acting normal.
No, they're not. But she's taking that onto herself instead of being like, wow, my parents are acting weird. She's like, I'm the cause of this.
Yes. Anyways, yeah, Rachel turns into a cat to infiltrate the home to try to learn secrets, like any new entrance to the Yerk pool or anything like that, from Vice Principal Chapman.
Which, there's one scene I really want to bring up because it was a -1 star for me. I would have given this 5 stars, but Rachel is walking alone to go home from the mall along the road and whatever, and a dude comes up and tries to kidnap her, like an older man, 20-something.
Yeah, I was about to say, that was your...
sexual harassment, yeah.
Because he doesn't succeed.
So she tries to run away, and she realizes she's not going to run fast enough, and she's like, I look weird when I morph. And so she half morphs into a elephant to scare him off. So Chapman and his daughter ride up and they're like, hey, do you need a ride? And she's like, yeah. And she doesn't want to tell him what happened because then she would have to explain some weird stuff like, well, how did you chase him off? And why are your shoes suddenly broken? Which I did kind of love because Rachel was like, hey, friend, you should come to the mall with me. I need to buy new shoes. And so it comes back around and her friend's like, what happened to your shoes? She's like, I told you I really needed to buy some new ones. I did like that. But what I didn't like, and I am disappointed with, she goes to her friends and she's like, hey, I almost got kidnapped. And they're all like, well, that's what you get for walking home alone. Your fault. Anyway, we're not going to tell anyone that you were almost kidnapped. How are you processing that, by the way? No, they're just like, that's on you. Anyway, how dare you morph and almost blow our cover? I know your life was in danger, but... And then they just blow past it. It's never brought up ever again. I don't like when people take things like that and trivialize it like, oh, that's just the reality of being a woman. Don't tell the police. Don't tell your parents. It's just a facts of life. I don't like it. I don't like that being trivialized because that's not a situation that the children could act like readers could get into. And they're like, oh, well, it was my fault that it happened, so I should just hide it to myself. I don't like it. I can't tell my friends or they'll blame me.
I could see why you read that. I think it was more a scene to set up how Rachel needs to be more careful with her morph.
That was the only thing where I was like, I'd have to have a conversation with my kid and be like, hey, that wasn't cool that her friends did that.
You learn a little bit about Rachel in book 2 because her parents are getting divorced. Her mom's kind of a mess, working all the time. So Rachel is a bit of a mother to her sisters, but also has to be the adult.
Yeah, she's kind of parentified.
Exactly.
But what she ends up learning from the house is Chapman's technically a voluntary host, but it's only to protect their daughter. And so that makes it extra sad that she doesn't think that they love her anymore. They're doing this to protect him. And I just have some questions about how quickly their infrastructure gets put up. He has a secret room in the basement now, and it's just a control room to talk to Visor 3 and get instructions, which center around, have you found the iron lights? No. Well, you suck. And I will demote you if you don't. So she's able to get in there once and gets caught. Chapman's like, oh, it's just the cat, and manages to convince Visor 3, hey, if something happened to the cat, the girl would be upset. If the girl's upset, then the host will be upset. And so Visor 3 accepts it the first time, because the first time he's just like, oh, kill it immediately. It could be an antidote, kill it. So that's the first time, and she's like, I'm gonna do this a second time, even though the whole team's like, hey, don't, or have someone go with you. Nope, gonna go do the thing. By the way, she and Tobias seem to have a thing.
Yes, they do.
We'll see how that develops as times go on, because Tobias is more down for it, because Tobias is also like a we have to save the world vibe.
Yes, it is one of the tragedies of the series, because he's a hawk and can have human relationships. Because he's a hawk, it's kind of, hard.
Which gets played up a little bit in the third book.
Yes.
So we'll have to make sure to mention that. But decides to go back a second time, and they decide the best thing to do to keep her from going haywire is to turn Jake into a flea?
Yes.
But all that ends up happening is he distracts her and she gets caught again.
I mean, that wasn't part of their plan.
No, but it was just like, dang it, Jake, because he can't see or hear anything because he's a flea.
Yes.
And they were worried a little bit because when he was a lizard, the lizard brain took over and ate a spider, and that is something that just destroys him to this day.
I mean, it destroys Tobias in book 3 when he finally kills a mouse for the first time.
Yes. The point of that is he's like, oh, actually, being a flea is really chill.
Yeah.
We don't have natural predators like the lizards do, so I'm not anxious all the time. I'm just here. I know warm spot means blood, which means food. So I will go to warm spot. And that's basically it.
Yeah, but I can understand why they did that. Because again, Rachel, they worry about her because she is acting pretty foolhardy through the novel. I mean, she's all like, oh no, I got to go in there again. They're like, you almost died last time. Like, no, we could learn something. I got to go in and risk my life again as a cat.
Yeah, but the only suckish thing is the entire time he's a flea, he keeps messaging her like, what's happening? What's happening? What's going on? What's happening? And so half the time she's having to give him a blow by blow, and so she keeps getting distracted.
It's fair, but on the other hand, he does also save her.
He does, but maybe we could have done something else, but it's okay. It's hindsight and all that.
Maybe. They are children still too, so I'm not going to say all their decisions are top notch.
I was just like, guys, Jake, shut up, stop asking, let her do the thing.
But yeah, she gets caught again, and Chapman realizes this time that the cat is definitely...
Weird. This is weird. This is too weird for cats. One time, maybe. Twice. Like, no, I don't think so.
He captures her, puts her into a pet carrier. There's this whole dramatic scene where he's taking the cat, and the daughter's like, where are you taking my cat? Don't take my cat. It's like the only thing that loves me still in this house, basically, sub the context.
Yeah.
And the dad isn't saying anything, and then Rachel tells Tobias, you got to get this cat here now. So Tobias scares the cat back to the house so that the cat rushes into her arms. So the dad can then go, oh, this is just some stray that got into our house.
That looks like your cat.
Exactly. That's your cat. And she's like, why didn't you answer me? He's like, I'm sorry, honey. And it's a really awkward scene.
Yeah, because she was seriously crying. Like, what are you doing with my cat? What are you doing with my cat? What are you doing with my cat? Until the actual cat comes in. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is just a stray. I knew it wasn't your cat. And she's like, then why didn't you just say that earlier when I was literally crying?
Yes. So Rachel is a selfless. Her character strength is she's selfless, really cares about her friend.
Yeah.
But the flaw to that is to a reckless nature. I mean, she basically outed herself for 100% at that moment by showing the real cat showing up. But yeah, so Vice Principal Chapman takes Rachel in the pet carrier to go meet Visser 3, who's going to come down to take the cat from him. But then Jake is able to get off and help her escape.
I did think he was a lizard at first, but then he was a flea.
Thought he was a lizard when he...
Yeah, I was like, oh, he's going to be a lizard again.
No, the flea comes in handy. I mean, think about it. If they need to get out of a cage or do anything like that, all you have to do is morph into a flea and you can...
Well, I mean, that would actually kind of suck because he points out, I can't see or hear anything.
Yeah, it is a little blind when you do it.
He literally can only sense warmth and not warmth.
But yeah, so they don't really learn anything.
Kind of learns her powers more. She lets the cat take over because the cat's terrified and start attacking and does it way better than she would have.
Yes.
By herself.
And she also, just like Jake in the first one, where he learns the stakes when he finds out his brother is a host. Rachel, not that she wasn't all gun-ho anyways to fight some creatures, and it is her cousin as well, Jake's brother, Tom. But she also sees the devastation that's happening to her friend, and it kind of reaffirms to her why they're doing this.
It gave her an emotional reason to be involved.
Yeah, it's not just, I want to crack some heads, it's, we really need to save these people.
Yeah, and it's the loyalty thing. She's extremely loyal to her friends, so she'll do whatever it takes.
She's a good character, though. I really like her character.
Yeah, the climax is really impactful. Jake turns into a tiger. She double morphs into a cat. They learned that double morphs reset the clock, which is nice. And Tobias just swoops down and grabs her and flies off because she's a cat. And he's like, you're really heavy as a cat. I could only take you so far. I'm only meant to pick up mice for short periods. It ends with Rachel writing a note to Melissa, who's the friend, to anonymously tell her that her dad loves her. She's trying. She's doing her best here.
Yeah, I mean, she's got to be careful because there's no guarantee your friend won't become a host. I mean, Visser 3 is on paper thin.
Yeah, he wanted them to bring her, and the only reason that they got away with not bringing her is because they brought the quote-unquote Andalite. And he was like, okay, fine, this is more important anyway.
Yes, so who knows how much longer until Melissa's a host, and if, Rachel reveals anything to her, the Yerk will know, and then they're dead. So, it's pins and needles. They can't tell their parents, because if their parents ever become a host...
Or if they already are.
I mean, it's terrifying for them, because anyone could be a Yerk.
But that fierce loyalty of Rachel's comes to light again when Tobias and her spring a random hop.
Yeah, forget that's how number 3 starts.
During a live furniture commercial.
Yeah, they both get in trouble for that.
Yeah, that was stupid.
That is Rachel. She is brash. She makes bad decisions.
Why did it have to be during the commercial?
Let's just say where Marcus is always hey, we need to hold back here. We can't do something crazy. Rachel's let's do something crazy.
No holds bar. So yeah, that causes people to be like, that's weird. And so there's even more hunt for them. Yay. But this book is mostly mostly about Tobias's
life as a hawk.
life as a hawk. He can't go to school. He can't do this, that, and the other thing. He can't experience different morphs. Because in the first book, he was like, man, I wish I could just be a hawk.
Yeah, he was very obsessed with, and you understand because of his troubled childhood, his troubled home, that being a hawk felt wonderful because he could just fly away from all the problems. But now in this book, he's struggling because he's losing his humanity. He's been a hawk for quite a while now, and he's struggling with being a human. He's watching his friends be human still, but he can't participate at all in the same things they do. And he's struggling. And the big tipping point is, so far up to this point, Jake has been feeding him leftover human food. He leaves him like steak or other meats up in his attic.
Basically little pieces. He also does like potatoes and stuff, and Tobias is like, I don't have the heart to tell him that I can't eat that.
Yes, he's like, I can only eat meat, right? And his hawk side is dying inside because it wants fresh food. To feed a hawk hamburger every day is just demoralizing. So the tipping point is that Tobias, at one point in the novel, finally sees a mouse in the weeds, and he swoops down and he kills it and he eats it. And he just has a breakdown. He has a crisis because he's like, oh my gosh, I'm an actual hawk now. I've killed something, I've eaten it, and I loved it. I enjoyed it, right? So he has a bit of a breakdown, goes and flies into the mall.
Yeah.
And Rachel's performing on a balance beam because Rachel does gymnastics. And there's a hawk loose in the mall just having a freak out.
And he's about to crash into a glass skylight until Marcus throws a baseball. You know, what 12-year-old boy doesn't just have a baseball on hand in the mall, but throws the baseball and then allows Tobias to actually fly through it instead of flying into it.
Because he's being a tad bit, not full suicidal, but
he's having a breakdown.
He's having such a breakdown, he doesn't realize he's about to really hurt himself.
Well, he kind of, because later on Rachel is like, did you mean to do that? And he's just kind of quiet about it. So I don't think he has an active wish, but if it happened, would that be so bad?
Yeah. Well, and it's because he's like, what's the value of my life anymore? I think at one point, doesn't he think, how long do red-tailed hawks live?
I think so.
Yeah, he's like, what kind of life am I going to have? I'm not going to live that many years, and I'm stuck like this. I just 100% a hawk now. I'm not really human anymore. So the novel is about them discovering a spaceship that's coming down to collect water. They think, hey, if we can reveal this spaceship, we don't have to fight this war by ourselves anymore.
Because people will be like, oh my gosh, aliens.
Aliens, and then they're not on their own anymore. So that's kind of supposed to be the main plot, but really it's the B plot. The main plot is Tobias struggling with the repercussions of being stuck in a morph. What is his life?
And he talks to Rachel several times about it. He thinks about it a lot. There's several times where she runs into that hawk that he set free, and he's like, I feel like I should join her.
Yes, it's a female. There's times where he's keeping an eye out for his friends, whether being fish or wolves or something, and he sees her, and he has the thought, maybe I should just go live and be a hawk with her. I'm not really human anymore.
Yeah, his instincts are, I should just go be with her. And it's not romantic, because hawks aren't really capable of romance, but it's just that natural desire to continue the line, to keep going, is mating. And so he just has those natural desires to be with her.
Yes, but also be her. He's looking at her, and it's not just the natural, I want to mate with her, because that's what the red-tailed hawk wants to do. It's the, I want to live the life she's living. I'm not human really anymore. I'm a red-tailed hawk. I need to be like her. And it's symbolic at the end that the Yerks, basically to save his friends, they get trapped inside the water unit as fish. They can't escape.
Oh, and there's a point where they're doing recon. They turn into wolves. It's at 2. Like, is it 2? Has it been 2 hours? Do you have a couple of minutes? Not sure. But at first, Cassie's able to transform back, but the others seem almost to get stuck, but then they manage to finally get out again. So they almost all turned into animals.
They almost got stuck as wolves. Yeah, and it's kind of triggering for Tobias because
Marcus is like, whoa, that would have been terrible if we were stuck as animals.
Terrible, says right in front of Tobias, who is stuck as an animal, right? So it kind of brings up the trauma once again for Tobias, how dreadful his situation is. So they're stuck in. He still is, I think, a blaster, a shredder. I can't remember what they call the laser guns. But he frees his friends, right? By grabbing one of their blasters and blowing a hole in the side of the tank to let them all out of the water system. And they morph from fish into birds and fly away, but because they're flying away, the Yerks start shooting at all the birds, and they end up killing and shooting the red-tailed hawk that they freed at the beginning of the novel. So it's very symbolic because it's also Tobias, that dream of being a red-tailed hawk. He realizes because of the Yerks, he can't just do that. He has to stay in the fight. No matter if he is stuck as a hawk, he has to keep fighting.
He's got to be on mission.
Exactly. And there's a deep part at the end where Rachel's like, hey, I bet if we went up there, we could find the body of the red-tailed hawk and we could give her a burial. And he's like, an animal doesn't care. She's dead. An animal wouldn't go bury her. And Rachel's like, but you're not an animal, Tobias. You're a human, right? And it's this dilemma of humans care when people die. Humans bury our dead. Animals don't. And Tobias is stuck between those two natures of still being a human mentally, but also being an animal at heart. And really, it's the bigger theme. And again, this is why I say this isn't a children's novel, is K.A. Applegate plays with this theme of, are we beasts or are we humans, right? There's a side of us that is animalistic, and what does it matter? We're all animals inside, but there's also a side where we're human. We have morals, right? We have these concepts and ideas and relationships and connections, right? And nature is all this battle between the animal inside us and also the human that we are.
The natural man.
Yes. The natural man versus the enlightened man. Yes, exactly. Which is a very common theme in literature. Anyways, K.A. Applegate's doing this with children's literature.
Which I stand by. It helps children process adult things, because the sad thing of life isn't made for children. I feel like there's so many times where there will be a parenting style where it's like, oh, we need to protect them to shield them from what's going on in the world, when it's like they're already going through it, just not in front of you. Having series like these that can do those heavy topics can help them.
Yes. I think this book does that for sure. Yeah, that's the first three.
Exploring empathy is always great, yes.
Yeah, these three books barely scratch the surface.
There are like 56, you said?
54 main books.
What percentage is that? We've done 5% of the books.
We have the main 54 books. We also have the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, the Andalite Chronicles, the Visser Chronicles.
So less than 5%.
Megamorphs. We have the Elemist Chronicles. There were a lot of side books that came out as well. Then they also had, speaking of 90s tropes, they have one of them where it's a second-person perspective. It's a choose-your-adventure where you become one of the Animorphs, and you have to make decisions in the book.
Those are pretty popular. I think those are still popular, honestly.
I mean, they still, and it was before the 90s that they started doing them, but I feel like 90s, there were Goosebumps books that did that. Animorphs did it. I feel like there were a lot of book series that did that, the choose-your-own-adventure narrative.
Yeah.
So I have one of those, and it's funny. You know, it's like, oh, should I morph into a giraffe and try to escape the lion's den, or should I play dead? It's like silly things like that.
There you go.
Yes. So anyways, yeah, I could go on and on. I don't want to ruin anything, but this series gets intricate. It has a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah. General thoughts. I don't know if the covers had been different, or if I had felt differently about the covers. I don't know how much I would have gotten into these books in elementary school, saying that. Middle school, I did hit a pretty deep sci-fi thing, and I read a bunch of books about aliens, including one that I swear exists, but I can't find anywhere on the internet, about the group of aliens that came to Earth and are pretending to be human, and the main character finds out he's an alien, and they're coming to take over the world. It's a whole thing. I never found it ever again. But, you know, I got into the uglies, the barcode tattoo, a bunch of sci-fi ones. So I wonder if I had gotten into it or checked it out from middle school, if I would have gotten really into it. But I don't think I would have gotten into it in elementary school.
Yeah. I mean, I got into it when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. Actually, funny enough, so confession here, which is sad. I got into them. They were coming out. And I think it was about halfway through middle school. I stopped reading them as much. So I didn't read the next few books for a while until I went to the bookstore and I saw that the last Animorph came out. I'm like, holy crap, the last one. I started to peter off on keeping up with them.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, every month I think they came out with one, and I got distracted by other kids stuff like Pokemon and other things. So when I saw the last book had come out, I'm like, oh crap, I need to read this thing. So that's when I read up on it, and I read the rest of them up to the final one, which I'm glad I did. So there was a moment where I kind of stopped following it as closely, and I don't think because the story didn't didn't get good. The story kept consistent to me. It was just because I got distracted by other stuff. And, I'm a kid. I have a short attention span. But I have to say, as an adult, so I think about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, as an adult, I think I was in my early 20s, I decided to read through the whole series again. And I have to say, as an adult, I was like, holy crap, this is a good book series. I really enjoyed this. So that's what I kind of like. It is for kids. I mean, it does have a language that they can understand. I do appreciate the mature themes they're bringing up at a level a kid could process. But even as an adult, I read through this series and I was like, I really still enjoy this series. This is a really good series. Now, granted, I might have nostalgia glasses still, but I don't know. As an adult, I was still like, there's parts I forgot about this book that I think are really good.
I mean, I'm an outsider. I didn't read these as a kid.
And you thought the first three were good, right?
Yeah, I gave them all 4 stars. I did a -1 star on Rachel, so I would have given her a 5 stars. But yeah, I thought they were really good.
Good. I figured you would.
We did have that joking moment where I finished the first book and you were like, how many stars do you give it?
Yeah, you said 4 and I was like, I disown you. It's 5 stars all the way. Yeah, I'm a little biased. These books hold a very special place in my heart. I mean, big time. It's hard to explain how big of an impact they had on me.
One question for the author. I would be curious what her favorite animal is.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
You got a lot of animals to research here. Let me take it back. I would ask twice. What was her favorite animal before she started writing this series and what her favorite animal is after writing the series?
Well, that is good.
Thank you.
My question can't be said here because it's about the ending of the series.
There's no other questions you could ask the author?
I mean, about the first 3? No, not really. I don't want to be too specific in case you ever do read them or if people listening to this ever want to read it, because I think it would be just terrible of me to ruin parts of the ending of this series.
So the question is just simply why?
Why? Certain aspects about the ending, I would want to ask why she went that way, because it hurt my heart.
Who hurt you? No, I'm kidding.
She did it. Applegate. Applegate made me fall in love with this series, and she hurt me in the end.
Well, no, the joke is who hurt her?
She's probably fine. And granted, being an adult and reading a lot of the other books I read with bittersweet endings and messed up endings and stuff like that, I mean, it's par for the course, but...
It is, but there's something different when it's a children's book, because there is the expectation.
I know, and that's the thing. As a child, I fell in love with these characters. I fell in love with this story. And I'm not saying she ended it badly. I love the ending of this series. I'm just saying it's the first time I had a series ending where it made me feel things I hadn't felt before, and it just stuck with me.
Rating. I would give this a War of the Worlds radio broadcast out of 10.
Why do you say that?
There's aliens and they're coming!
There you go.
No, I thought it was very entertaining for what it is. I would recommend War of the Worlds radio broadcast now. I listened to the whole thing. I really enjoy it. I think it's good. And it can be a little gimmicky, but I think as a whole is very good. And that's kind of how I feel about this.
I would give it a 10 out of 10.
Come on, you can do it.
No, there's no silly footing about it. I think this series is perfection to me. I know that's silly and I know I have nostalgia glasses, but I love these books. They just speak to me. So I will give it the straight face 10 out of 10. I know that seems silly, but I won't give any other series a 10 out of 10. This is the 10. It is childhood perfection.
Childhood perfection out of 10.
There we go. You can keep that if you want. Childhood perfection out of 10.
Read again.
Yes. 100%. I have done it. I have read it again.
I could see rereading it if I was doing it with someone like our child. I could see rereading it that way, but there's so many of them and we'll see where that gets us. But
I think our child's ability to read the books on his own is a good sign that he's ready to read the books, right? That was one of the problems of that person I know who started reading the books to her kid. Her kid was a little too young.
Yeah.
And I think if you have the ability to read, understand, and enjoy them, you're probably mature enough at that point, unless you're an early reader, of course. But I feel like you wouldn't have to read them to our son if he's ready for them. I feel like he would be at a point to be able to read them to himself.
Which is true. Fair point. I would still want to read them with him just because it does have those heavy topics and then we can stop and we can talk about and discuss and digest it together. What works best with children, co-doing stuff with them and talking about them. And it helps the process stuff. But yes, I would agree with that. But I don't have a problem with giving these to him.
Yeah, I mean, they're mature, but like you said, they present them well. There's no cursing in the books or inappropriate moments that go over the top, I guess you could say. I mean, there's mature moments like we point out in the second book with the sexual harassment, but I don't think it goes so far where it would be too far for a children's book.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just something maybe you're like, okay, let's discuss that, and not, I need to censor this for you. Favorite of the series so far, I would say The Visitor, and it's mainly because I think Rachel has the strongest narration.
Oh, yeah. No offense to Jake and Tobias, but you might be right. I might be a little biased to Rachel. I kind of like her as a character. I like all of them, though. Cassie's really good, too.
You can still like all of them and have a favorite.
I know. I think growing up, Jake the most, but looking back as an older adult, well, also as a fantasy and sci-fi nerd, Rachel's just a fun character. Like Marco says, Xena, warrior princess.
And I haven't had Cassie's narration yet. I don't know.
I like her narration. I like her as a character. She has some really good books in the series. But Rachel, hands down, has some really good ones as well.
Yeah. So, but of the 3 books we have read so far, I can say Rachel.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But have you read this book? If you could only have one animal morph, what would it be? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring The Invasion, The Visitor, and The Encounter with us. Join us next time when we'll be covering The Rescuers by Marjorie Sharp. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm James Reiner.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.